Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. And today we're joined by Catherine Blaiklock, the founder of the Brexit Party, who played a pivotal role in its creation before handing the reins to Nigel Farage. From ally to outspoken critic, Catherine has a unique insider's perspective on the man who became the face of Brexit. She's accused him of betrayal, broken promises, and a leadership style that excludes talent. Claims she's not shy about sharing on X. With us now to unpack her journey with Farage, the highs, the lows, and what she sees as the truth behind the public persona. Please welcome Catherine Blaiklock.
Hello, good afternoon.
It's very nice for you to join me. And you contacted me after my sex, lies, and treachery interview with Martin J. Why was that?
Because everybody else has a story, and there's lots of stories going around. So there are obviously about 50 people who have been excluded, or all sorts of things have happened to them. All the circumstances are slightly different, but they have one thing in common, which is for whatever reason, they have challenged Nigel and or they have disobeyed Nigel and he hasn't liked it. I am finding more stuff all the time. So I don't know whether you ever remember, but there was a website called Junius. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah,
And it's not around anymore. But I was talking to Michael Crick of Godfrey Bloom and the Magazine fame, and he says he's got a copy of a lot of it. I mean, in retrospect of what's going on, it makes fabulous reading, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And we should revisit that. And always, as I say, in the interest of balance, I've asked my team to reach out to Nigel. I've had the joy of sharing a studio with him as well. So we can always get lots of different sides of the story and a chance to respond to what are quite serious accusations. I want to take us all the way back, first of all, though. You were the founder and first leader of the Brexit Party before Nigel Farage even became involved. Can you walk me through how you initially brought him on board and what your vision was for the party at that time?
Okay, so I bought a number of names of companies with the aim of setting up a party with nothing to do with Nigel, actually, to do with Henry Bolton, who was the leader installed effectively by Nigel, who Nigel had met on a train or something. And myself and another person thought that it was being run in an awful way and it was not getting anywhere and it was a disaster. And so we talked endlessly about doing something else. So it was during that period that I bought the Brexit Party as a name, but I also I looked at Alternative for Britain, I looked at our people, a number of different things. Three of the companies I actually bought. So I had sort of just a stack of companies. So that was the first point. And then there was then after Henry Bolton, there was Gerard Batten, and then there was the row going on about Tommy Robinson. And I thought that this was the wrong argument to be having, that we hadn't got Brexit and that you should be doing things in order. So you can't control immigration until you control Brexit. But of course, that was actually a different problem, and I would argue lie, nothing to do with Nigel, but to do with the Conservatives. Um, and so I was speaking to Nigel, and I was going to leave means leave and involved in things. And I said to Nigel, I've got this company, and maybe I should set this up as a party. And he liked the name. So I was setting it up. And then Nigel had the big fallout and couldn't get back to lead UKIP because the NEC voted against him. And so Nigel was looking for alternatives, and Nigel doesn't want to do that stuff himself. So I think he was looking at Democrats and veterans. Do you remember them?
Yes.
Then there were a number of parties that he looked at, but he decided on this one.
Yeah. Now, you stepped down as leader of the Brexit Party in March 2019, and Nigel took over shortly afterwards. What led to that transition? Do you feel that your departure was handled fairly by Nigel and the party?
all now. But one thing you have to remember, myself, like many other people, were very loyal to Nigel. We weren't trying to hurt Nigel. I have tried so many times to be helpful and to do things to help Nigel. So, um, if I know what I know now, I probably would have handled it very differently. Let's put it this way: I would have handing the we didn't have a written agreement. We had no agreement. There was my implied agreement of what was going to happen was obviously very different from his implied agreement. My implied agreement was that I would be on the board, that there would be a board, that I would be helping to find the people that would be on the board, that I would hand the leadership over to Nigel, and that I would still be heavily involved in the running of the party and the administration and a political figure.
Yeah, you say it was implied. What was it expressed? Was that a conversation you had with Nigel?
No, there was no, there was, I mean, it was implied. And so I always considered myself to have a role. I mean, why would you do all this work for a cause and have no role whatsoever? I mean, I've got better things in my life than to spend 6 hours sitting at a bank trying to open a bank account. I'm not an administrator and I'm not paid to do this. And I could write some articles instead that would have much more effect. If he wants an administrator, he can get any old bod to do it. So, you know, I mean, afterwards, he actually called me an administrator, and I find that very demeaning. He said a number of things. I mean, on one occasion, he said, "We fired her." He snapped back and said, "We fired her," to which I wrote a tweet, which I didn't remember, but Carl Benjamin brought it up, saying, "You couldn't fire me because I owned everything. I actually could fire you, Nigel, but you can't fire me."
Yeah, and it is interesting because we always talk. I mean, and Nigel's cultivated this image as a charismatic, straight-talking figurehead for Brexit. I mean, having worked closely with him, do you think that persona matches the reality of the man you knew?
Well, Godfrey Bloom says he changed after 2010. I have no doubt about it that initially Nigel had what I would call pure intentions. He had intentions about getting out of the European Union. The question, I guess, is whether he was a patriot and what you would call a populist, although I hate that term because all parties that win votes are popular, one would presume. Um, um, I'll be the unpopulist party. I think that would be quite funny. We'll put out so high, we're the unpopulist party. I think that's a good name for a party, actually.
Yeah.
But Joe Button has repeated, including this week, that he always called him a Tory, and a Tory being rather rude conservative, I think, an old Tory, a Tory. And I think what's happened this week is quite clearly, in the last few weeks, has shown that he's not what we thought he was in terms of policy. And I never really have, this was never a personal vendetta. If anybody could have a personal vendetta, for example, against me, it would be Gerard Batten, and he's been really amicable about it. I mean,
And why just to be clear for everybody, why would Gerald have a personal vendetta against you?
I, inverted commas, destroyed UKIP. But, my argument is no, I didn't, because the setting for destroying UKIP was set when you got the wrong priorities. And Nigel was the person who was the person, and he got chucked out of that party effectively. He was not leader, so that's effectively chucking him out.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it is interesting on that sort of basis. I mean, you've criticised Nigel for not building teams, excluding talented people, and struggling with dissent. From your first-hand experience, how would you describe his approach to leadership? And do you think it's held back the political right in Britain?
It's appalling. I've never worked with anybody worse. I mean, on one hand, I've never worked with anybody more energetic. So, um, let's not get these muddled up. He is the most determined, focused, and energetic person I have ever worked with. This is somebody who can drive from Strasbourg at 4 in the morning and then do an evening conference on the same day.
Yeah.
Who,
And he does famously, he does it without notes and so on and so forth. And certainly he hit a nerve, didn't he, with the electorate. And people sort of turned around and thought, well, look, this is a real issue. Nigel's our man. And seeing the reaction to the latest controversy. I mean, a lot of people say, well, hang about, Nigel's going to save us.
yeah. Well, the issue is that two-thirds of the people, I would argue, at the moment, who are active in reform are defending Nigel very vigorously, and the other third, who are probably more ideologically based and less, I would say, less blinded, are saying, how can this happen? This is wrong, 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 wrong on a policy level. This is not what we were told was happening. And of course, then there's always the political hangers on and the people who've been promised stuff and whatever. So they're just going to support Nigel. But I was just going to say, in terms of organizational style, I wrote a article for Carl Benjamin. You can find it on Lotus Eaters, which is something like "What is Nigel really like?" And I had contacted a big advertising agency through another contact of
Which
mine.
one?
Um, I guess I can say Pagefield. Do you know them?
Yeah.
Mark, yeah, he's sold it, I believe, now. And then Leslie Caton, who I would say is from the left of the Brexiteers. So he had a wide range. He and Leslie Caton, who then eventually worked for the Brexit Party full time, did you know that?
Yeah.
Came in and I introduced them to a meeting with Nigel. And I think in that meeting was Mark and Leslie, myself, Nigel, possibly Richard, but I don't think so. Four of us, I think. And Leslie had this notebook, and the meeting was scheduled for an hour. This was the first meeting about the advertising and the campaigning, logo, etc., for the Brexit Party, right at the very beginning. And I said to Leslie, you won't need that notebook. Does that tell you what you mean?
Well, and what did you mean, just for anybody who's in any doubt, why wouldn't he need that notebook?
Spent 55 minutes telling people anecdotes about what happened in a bar in Strasbourg. And in 5 minutes at the end said, oh, well, really nice to meet you. Yeah, well, thanks for coming. Well, we'll do, yeah, we'll sort of get on with it. That was the plan.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I've read a lot of your posts, including those on X. You suggest that Nigel humiliated you and broke promises such as the assurance of standing in Great Yarmouth. What exactly happened behind the scenes, and how did that impact your trust in him?
Um, I just went underground and left the political process, basically. I mean, I just stopped writing. I stopped being involved in politics offensively. I mean, I did a teeny bit with the English Democrats, but effectively that's it's a social club. I stopped writing. I stopped campaigning for anybody. I had no party. It was worse than humiliating. It destroyed my reputation. The two articles. I mean, there there was humiliation and exclusion all the way along. They would do things like leave me in the rain, have lunches without me, a boys' lunch, club lunch. Um, so I'd be at a bank doing documents with two other people who I'd appointed, and they would have to rush off because they were having a lunch. I mean, that sort of thing.
And
Um,
it clearly still hurts, doesn't it?
let's put it this way. I stood on a platform to support Rupert Lowe. So, as before this issue with Rupert, I was still essentially on board with the political message. I wasn't doing anything. I mean, I'd started to have some grumbles, but I hadn't had a full scale out of it. So because I wanted to give them a chance to see what they were going to do politically. But when they started with all these policies, of which started quite a long time back, so COVID was the first shot. And I thought that the way they handled that, and they weren't even, I mean, they're supposed to be a libertarian party. They just flattened on it. And so you had people like Andrew Bridgen and Piers Corbyn from the left, and myself and Jeff Wyatt and other people standing up, and loads of individuals who were being hauled off to court. And they did nothing. That was the first one. Then there was Shamina Beggar. Well, then there was, oh, let's bring in Tony Blair. This is a great idea. I mean, and then there was Shamina Begum when the left was saying, no, we don't think she should come back. She's a very difficult figure and she's a treasonous figure and she's fought against our country. And he thinks it's a good idea to bring her back. And everybody goes, really? And then there was obviously uh, the Stephen Edgerton interview where he said, well, basically, we can't deport people, or it's just never going to work. And everybody went, well, what's your party about then? And then we had obviously Zia Youssef, the change of the structure, bringing in Nick Candy, who's got lots of contacts with Qatar, and then bringing in the plumber, who is an arch Remainer, who wants to join back into the EU, and then bringing on some communists and some woman socialist worker party people and a Bangladeshi nationalist. And it's like, okay, so basically you'll take anybody, Nigel. You take my dog if they'll help you in the right direction.
Yeah. You say the plum. I mean, Charlie Mullins. I mean, he broke that on the Andrew Eborn show. He said that Nigel had contacted him and asked him to stand, and because of, and the interesting juxtaposition, and I put this to Charlie and also to Ben Habib. I mean, Charlie famously is pro Europe. He was totally against Brexit. What's your take on that?
It's a travesty. The whole thing is a big lie. The whole thing is anybody and anything with no principles for power.
Now, you've implied that Nigel allowed The Guardian Hope Not Hate to portray you as a racist during your resignation. How do you think Nigel handled that situation? And do you believe he could have defended you more robustly?
Well, I know how they handled it. So you see, the other thing that happened with that, as well as with Rupert, is that it's all prepared. It's so quick. It's like, if you look back on it, how could you have a letter for me to sign in 30 minutes? I mean, how could you? From a lawyer, a letter, you've got to resign. And then I was invited onto Newsnight that night. Well, now I just go. I mean, there's just no way. But I'm brand new to politics. Like, I'm like Rupert. I mean, I've been involved in Rupert's probably got more political experience. I've been involved in UKIP. I stood at Parliament, but I'm really new to this level of politics. I mean, standing for some seat that's never going to win or a county council. This is low level stuff. If you get an article in the local newspaper, you might be lucky. Yeah, this is big stuff. This is high level. This is national. And so yes, I was told absolutely categorically, you've got to go underground and not say anything. And that article, I have said it before, is still used by Femi as an example of a racist. And there are two things I want to say about it. Is one, it doesn't say my husband is black. It's just a minor detail that got forgotten. And number two, the article was never published. It was a blog I'd written, which was thinking about what the differences between Jamaica and Britain are and why we have certain things. And, I'm a big fan of Jamaicans. I'm married to one. I like them, actually. You don't marry somebody you can't stand, do you, really, normally? Yeah, do you?
Well,
Um,
you make a very interesting point, and as I say, people always go for the headlines, and it's that label about being racist or an anti-Semite or homophobic, and I absolutely despise labels because it's an easy way of dismissing a sensible argument, isn't it?
well, and a complex person who has many things they've done in their life. All of us of our age, and even people who are 30, have done many, many, many different things.
So,
And
are you a racist?
I don't like I think that will be called an Islamophobe because I think that Islam and Western democracy are not compatible. That doesn't mean that my accountant was a Muslim. It doesn't mean I don't go to Muslim places and haven't had interactions with Muslim people. But we get ourselves in these knots about what an English person is because we can't define it, because we all know what we really think, but we can't say it, what people identify. So it's just a minefield. But my issue is that national identity is important, and that if people feel that things are not fair and their national identity is disappearing, they will start to get more than just a bit upset. And the reason I went into this in as far back as 2014 was that I thought if we carried on like this, we'd end up with a civil war. And as far as 11 years ago, I thought that we are creating a country like Nepal, which has got 70 different groups, but we have now something like 2,000 different groups. And the other thing that's really interesting about multiculturalism is, so we have, say, 210 countries, of which we obviously have got representation in all of them. But Nepal, for example, which is a tiny country, has got 70 groups within that group, some of whom absolutely don't get on with each other, etc. So Kenya is riven by tribal differences. Those groups will be another great group of people. And then overlay that, you have class differences. So if you look at the outside of people, you can't tell that there's a class structure there. So, I mean, I will give you an example of this. Somebody said, "Oh, look at all my diverse workforce," and the other person said, "Yes, but they're all Brahmins," and Brahmins, of course, being the highest caste Indians there are. The majority of Indians in this country are Brahmin. They're very high caste. So, um, this is part of the problem, that we just don't see that we're creating sub countries and subcultures and sub rivalries. And you've seen where, you'll have one group of Eritreans fighting another group of Eritreans outside an embassy or something, outside for some. And so we're bringing all the world's problems into our country. And we don't need a Shia Sunni war to be fought, you know, in the middle of London. And that's the potential that we have. So I talk, and I have talked a lot about ethnicity and about race, but race is only a proxy for differences and cultural differences and linguistic differences and social differences and different mores.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your husband's black. How did you meet?
I met him on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean. So I've been married for about 12 years now. And then previous to that, I was married to a Nepalese, a Sherpa, which is why I know lots about Nepal. And I was married to him for 12 years, and I have two children. But of course, I am interestingly criticized from both sides. So I've been on Carl Benjamin's blog, and looked at the comments, and people have written she's part of the problem, right? So, like, I'm very definitely what would be called a civnat. Do you understand that
Yeah.
term? Rather than ethnonat, yeah? So,
Elaborate for those who are not clear.
sorry?
Elaborate for those who are not clear of the phrase.
Well, an ethnonat is somebody basically who defines Englishness or Welshness by skin color and parents of the same color and the same, so generations. I mean, I've never even gone into the detail of where they are on Scotland and Ireland and Wales because that's all overlapped. I mean, is a Scottish person supposed to be sent back here or something? And then civnats are people who, basically say we live with many people of different cultures and races, but we have too many people and too many immigrants, and it's upsetting our social balance. B, we have criminals and we have people who are illegal, and our social security system and our health service and our housing are absolutely falling to pieces because they can't cope with this. And so, I'm certainly with Rupert Lowe on deportations. But, I'm not saying like the Civnats are that I say to them, so what's going to happen to my children? What happens to people who are half Jamaican and never been to Jamaica? What are you going to do with them? I mean, this is ridiculous. Ridiculous. I mean, I can't remember who was it who said, if I was at a starting point, I'd rather not start here.
Oh,
Somebody
yes.
said, well, I mean, that's how I feel about it, that we are where we are
Yes.
and we have to work with what we've got. And my real issue is to try and stabilize where we are, not make it worse,
Yeah.
because at the moment we're in danger of making it even worse.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you're obviously your husband hears all these accusations about you being a racist and so on and so forth. What does he make about those accusations, and what are his views?
Well, you see, there are two things about that. One is he ignores it, and he's more interested in what's going on in Jamaican politics and doesn't really, like many people who. And the second thing is that, and we don't discuss race. We never talk about race. I mean, we never complain to each other. No, you didn't do the washing up because you must, because we never do. You don't discuss anything like that. I mean, I think people discuss whether somebody's a bit fat or put on weight more than you would discuss that. It's just a given, It's like he's a man and I'm a woman. We don't start discussing it whether we aren't. It's But the other thing that people don't realize is how conservative many people who ethnic minorities or ethnic majority are. He is actually on some issues much more conservative than I am. I mean, Jamaica is Old Testament social life. I mean, abortion is still illegal. Most people would not have an abortion, and I mean, gays are really not accepted in the society. And this is it's not a minority view. It's just sort of that's how Jamaica is.
Yes.
So I don't agree with either of those. But so that's what I mean about he's more conservative than I am on certain social issues.
Yeah. Do you have any big rows?
About what?
Well, I was going to say, if so, about what?
Um, well, we have some rows occasionally, but they tend to be fairly occasionally.
And you find a resolution. And I want to look at the structure of the Brexit Party. I mean, you mentioned handing over your shares in the Brexit Party to Nigel in a not-for-profit trust, only for him to sell them later. Can you clarify what agreement you had with him and what evidence you have, like the email or trust document you referenced?
Well, I have the trust document. And if you go into Companies House on the register, you can see that trust document being executed. You can see where I gave the one share to the trust. So you can see the execution of the inward part of it, but you don't really see it out on there. I'm not a legal person, but you can see the execution of the trust.
Okay. And so the agreement you had with Nigel was what exactly?
There wasn't one. I mean, the agreement always was he was going to leave the party. I mean, I wasn't going to leave the party, but there was never an agreement about what was going to happen to the shares, I mean, I was adamant that I wanted it to be limited by guarantee or and it was suggested to put a trust document instead. But these are legal things. the only reason that it ended up by share was at that point at Companies House when I was buying names, it was really cheap to buy a company by share. It was like cost £6 or something. Whereas if you bought a company limited by guarantee, it was like costing £100. So since I was buying so many companies, I bought it by share.
Right.
That's the origin of it.
It's as
Just
simple as that.
simple as that. You can just,
You
get.
saved your 94 quid.
Yeah, and I was buying a name. I wasn't buying because because you could have swapped numbers, bought other things, changed articles, done various things afterwards. All sorts of stuff you can do.
Yeah.
As you will see, if you look at carefully at Reform 2025, and you now go back to the Reform Party, if they haven't got rid of the shares, those original shares are now owned in full by Reform 2025. So you can see that they gave up and they sent them to Reform 2025 controls those shares. So there's now two structures. We haven't the other one is still sitting there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're going to look at when we bring you back is the structure of reform itself, and what people, when they talk about members and the phenomenal figures that Nigel's very proud to talk about in the media much more, and tease Kemi and so on and so forth, what it actually means to be a member. But for now, Catherine, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to look a bit more about your relationship with Nigel, the current rows, and the various different individuals concerned. But for now, Catherine Blaiklock, thank you very much for joining me.
Okay, thank you.